This is Mrs. Turpin's Ugly Revelation. This essay was written by American novelist Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor was plagued with lupus, and she eventually died at a very young age of 39. She actually wrote to a friend later that she identified with Mary Grace, that she had come to realize that society, although not evil in and of itself, was capable of undercutting true Christianity. Her work was very controversial and still is not taught in a lot of schools. Now, Revelation was set in a begins in a doctor's waiting room. It's mostly set in the doctor's waiting room, a very small, dirty, cramped, full waiting room. This offered Mrs. Turpin the opportunity to sit back and judge. So the theme that we are going to be discussing and working with is, as a society, we're often very quick to judge others without considering the people that we are judging may be judging us. There's many characters in this story. So the main character is Mrs. Turpin. She is the prejudiced farmer's wife. She walks into the waiting room and positions herself in the middle of this small, cramped room and begins judging everybody and everything in this room. There was also Clyde, her husband, and he's kind of the opposite of her. He's just a kind of easygoing guy and does what he's told and just is perfectly content with the situation at hand. Mary Grace's mom, who Mrs. Turpin refers to as the lovely lady, sits across from Mrs. Turpin, and they seem to really have a lot in common, but it's very much on that sociable, superficial level. Then there's Mary Grace, the college age girl who sits with her mom reading Human Development, and she eventually does throw the book at Mrs. Turpin, kind of giving the readers a idea of what Miss Flannery O'Connor wanted us to see, judgment kind of being thrown back at Mary Grace or at Mrs. Turpin. So I actually chose this picture because Mrs. Turpin says that she judges people based on their shoes a lot. So I thought that this picture was very apropos for that. There's also the white trashy mom who Mrs. Turpin doesn't really even believe deserves to have an opinion, like a lot of other people. Um, Flannery O'Connor uses the setting of the waiting room to portray this grotesque character of Mrs. Turpin. This cramped, tight room that doesn't seem to fit, doesn't have anywhere to sit. It's got a dirty, overflowing ashtray and fake plants, all kind of leads us to this grotesque character that she has. So it's very interesting when you begin to study the brain's response to self reflection. Um, the findings in this article that I found that was written on the Chinese population suggest that self modulated emotional processing occurs in a rapid and automatic way, which is very interesting when the opposite occurs when an individual is processing another person's opinion of themselves or someone else. So, what it boils down to is it's actually easier for the brain to judge others or ignore the judgment of others than it is for the brain to judge itself, to self reflect. So, how do you form an opinion of an individual? Well, there are two main dimensions of judging an individual: communion and agency. Communion is the warmth, kindness, or friendliness of a person, where agency is more of the competence or the power to influence others or their strength. Communion is whether an individual intends to help you or hurt you, whereas agency is whether that individual has the ability to carry out what they intend. So they're they have now broken communion down into two subgroups, and they've actually found that these two subgroups are more important than communion or agency. So communion was broken down into morality and sociability. So what is the difference between being moral versus being sociable? So morality is honesty, trustworthiness, sincerity. Sociability is your kindness, your likability, your friendliness. So the really interesting thing is that society places an extremely heavy role on the morality aspect of an individual as they're collecting information and forming those first impressions, second impressions, and final impressions of an individual. It is their morality that determines whether or not that they're liked. And this goes the same for groups of people as well. Morality determines whether or not a person represents a threat. So, was Miss Turpin moral? Will she change because of what happened in the waiting room? This all shows you how easy it is to judge others and how much more effort is involved in evaluating yourself. It is worth it when you realize the importance society puts on morality. The question you have to ask yourself is it worth it to you? Thank you.